Just back from Hofstra University and a little sleep deprived, but not so bleary-eyed that I can't see the media consensus, which is that Hillary Clinton won the debate on points against Donald Trump. Hillary was aggressive early, she was aggressive late, and Donald Trump spent much of the debate on the defensive. Now, you have to balance that by saying that Donald Trump stood up there for 90 minutes, debated serious issues with a former Secretary of State, committed no major gaffes, so his people have something to cheer about. But in watching all of the spinning and analyzing going on television and reading the accounts online and in the newspapers, it varied from, Hillary Clinton had the upper hand, she did better in this first presidential debate, to she clobbered him, he ran out of material, he didn't look comfortable as a debater, and all of that. I didn't see anybody say, wow, Donald Trump really won this thing, and even his partisans are saying, well.
Overall, what do you think of the criticism that's been leveled so far, or what do you think of the performance of the moderator?
Look, in the first 25 minutes, Lester Holt let the two candidates go at it. He took a passive approach. That was fine. In the last hour, there's no other way to say this, Bill. I respect Lester Holt and the career that he had. He was one-sided. 5 fact-checking questions to Donald Trump, 0 to Hillary Clinton. 41 interruptions of Donald Trump, 7 times for Hillary Clinton. And it was worse than that. You just played the birther exchange. 3 questions on that. Follow-up questions on Trump's tax returns. Follow-up questions on how he couldn't prove that he had previously opposed the Iraq War. All fair game, all legitimate, but nothing comparable on the Clinton side.
So Trump earlier today said they were unfair questions. Were they unfair? Or were they just out of balance?
They were not unfair, and had Lester Holt chosen to take a similarly aggressive approach with the Democratic nominee, I think I would say he did a great job, but that was not the case. On the email scandal, for example, the only time Lester Holt asked Hillary Clinton about it was when Donald Trump brought it up in an answer, and he turned to Clinton, and Holt said, do you want to respond to that? No follow-up there. It's easy to go through, he didn't ask this, he didn't ask that about the Clinton Foundation, but if you're going to take the approach that you're going to interrupt and ask about Donald Trump's stop and frisk policing policies, for example, when you do that repeatedly, and I'm not saying this affected the outcome, Hillary Clinton was more aggressive, Donald Trump was on the defensive the whole night, so it's not because of Lester Holt. But if you look at the transcript, and I've gone back and look at the clips, there's no other conclusion that he was tougher, much tougher on one candidate.
Did you feel that in person last night? Did you feel that way last night, or did it take until this morning for you to develop that thought?
No, I felt that way as the debate was unfolding. Because
the reason I ask you,
yes,
Howie, is because this is exactly what Trump said earlier today. I hear on Fox and Friends. Watch here.
He didn't ask her about the emails at all. He didn't ask her about her scandals. He didn't ask her about the Benghazi deal that she destroyed. He didn't ask her about a lot of things that she should have been asked about. I mean, there's no question about it.
You look at the transcript, you look at the interruptions, you look at the aggressiveness toward each candidate. It is not a close call. He was not even-handed in the way that he approached these two candidates. And I think Trump partisans are entitled to say, they watched the debate. They saw a moderator trying to get more questions in the second half, maybe because the thing got out of control earlier. Seeing a moderator being harder on their candidate. They have a legitimate beef today.
Rudy Giuliani, come on over here.
No, I watched it twice, including I stayed up until 4 in the morning.
What do you mean you watched it twice?
4 in the morning.
You were there live.
You're damn right.
And then you watched it again?
Yeah, then I went home and I watched Lester Holt do Candy Crowley at least twice.
What did he do that you didn't like?
Well, the first thing he said was stop and frisk is unconstitutional. Well, it happens to be not unconstitutional. Terry versus the United States is the law of the land by the Supreme Court of the United States. It has never been reversed, and we do stop and frisk in New York and all over America.
It was struck down by one judge here in New York.
Not as unconstitutional as applied. In other words, it was being done incorrectly, according to the judge.
And it was being appealed, and this mayor decided not to appeal it.
Not only was it being appealed, the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit had excoriated her, basically said she was wrong, entered an injunction against the enforcement of her order, and removed it from the case. Everything Donald said. And Holt went ahead and contradicted him.
And Donald Trump...
Ignorantly.
Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing. Right now, our police, in many cases, are afraid to do anything.
It's expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our mayor, our new mayor, refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it, throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them.
Stop and frisk was found to be unconstitutional.
Donald Trump last night said it works. Stop and frisk works. And you said, was it the New York Times this morning had an article about how it does work?
I think it had to do with whether or not the murder rate had gone up or down. And apparently the murder rate in New York
had gone down dramatically after stop and frisk.
Of course it did. It went down 65%. But the thing that's wrong is Lester Holt said straight out, stop and frisk is unconstitutional. Lester Holt is not a lawyer. He's wrong. It was decided in 1959 by Earl Warren. It is still the law of the land. Every cop does stop and frisk in every part of America. Mm-hmm. And she said the same thing. Now, I'll give her an excuse because she failed the bar exam. But I'm not going to allow him to play lawyer and contradict our candidate. And I'd like to know, when did a moderator become a fact checker? And if you're going to be a fact checker, you better darn be right. You better go read the United States Supreme Court decision. Yeah. And you better go talk to Cavuto. And you better go talk to Hannity. And you better go talk
about what? About what?
About whether he was opposed to the Iraq War. One of the reasons I was reluctant to support him was because he was against the Iraq War. I happen to be in favor of the Iraq War. I still am in favor of the Iraq War.
Donald supported the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
You had supported the war in Iraq before the invasion. What makes your judgment?
I did not support the war in Iraq.
2002.
That is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her because she, frankly, I think the best person in her campaign is mainstream media.
My question is, since you
would you like to
supported
hear?
it, why is your
war. Wait a minute. I was against the war in Iraq, just so you put it out.
The record shows otherwise.
The record does not show that.
Why is your judgment?
The record shows that I'm right. When I did an interview with Howard Stern, very lightly, first time anyone's asked me that, I said, very lightly, I don't know, maybe, who knows, essentially. I then did an interview with Neil Cavuto. We talked about the economy is more important. I then spoke to Sean Hannity, which everybody refuses to call Sean Hannity. I had numerous conversations with Sean Hannity at Fox, and Sean Hannity said, and he called me the other day, and I spoke to him about it. He said, you were totally against the war because he was for the war.
Why is your judgment better than...
And that was before the war starts. If somebody would call up Sean Hannity, this was before the war started, he and I used to have arguments about the war. I said it's a terrible and a stupid thing. It's going to destabilize the Middle East, and that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is
you
your
didn't hear what I
judgment...
said.
What I am offended by is Lester Holt interfering twice in the debate, saying that stop and frisk is not constitutional. Dead wrong. Hillary Clinton said the same thing. Dead wrong. Terry against the United States. Go read it. Written in 1958.
So you are fact-checking Lester Holt.
No, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a moderator who misrepresents on television. I'm a lawyer.
You're really angry about this.
Am I angry about it? I thought after Candy Crowley we saw the last of it. What Holt did last night, if journalism has ethics, if it has ethics, he violated the rules of ethics. Now, if you're going to interrupt and you're going to correct me in front of 100 million people, you better be right. He is dead wrong. I'm here to say that what Lester Holt did is completely unprofessional and totally unethical.
What was the second thing he did?
The second thing he did was Baghdad. He interrupted him twice and said, oh, no. I'm sorry, not Baghdad, but Iraq.
The Iraq War.
He said, you didn't say that you were opposed to the Iraq War beforehand. And he should have had enough energy to check the sources, including I was on Neil Cavuto's show later, and I saw the tape.
Yeah.
And he opposed the Iraq War before the Iraq War. And he had Sean Hannity available and about 20 of Donald's friends who could have been available to tell him that. Now,
but this is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs. And someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers, who has said women don't deserve equal pay unless they do as good a job as men. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He loves beauty contests, supporting them and hanging around them. And he called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
her
this?
name
Where
is
did you find
Alicia
this?
Machado.
Where did you find
and
it?
she has become a U.S. citizen, and you can bet she's going to vote this November.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump, we'll take 10 seconds, and then we're going to have the final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous commercials. Some of it said in entertainment. Some of it said somebody who's been very vicious to me, Rosie O'Donnell. I said very tough things to her, and I think everybody would agree that she deserves it, and nobody feels sorry for her. But you want to know the truth? I was going to say something extremely rough to Hillary, to her family, and I said to myself, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's inappropriate. It's not nice. But she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on negative ads on me, many of which are absolutely untrue. They're untrue and they're misrepresentations. And I will tell you this, Lester, it's not nice, and I don't deserve that. But it's certainly not a nice thing that she's done. It's hundreds of millions of ads, and the only gratifying thing is I saw the polls come in today, and with all of that money, over $200 million is spent, and I'm either winning or tied, and I've spent practically nothing.
One of you will not win.
Joining us now live with reaction, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich is with us. Let's start at the end of the debate. It was a real wide opening, and Donald Trump said, no, I'm not going to take the shot. Surprised probably a lot of people.
Look, I think that may have been the best single moment of the entire debate. Hillary was mean, nasty, personal, knew it was a cheap shot, knew it was coming at the end of the debate, deliberately tried to crowd him. He had a perfect moment there to clobber her. And he looked over at Chelsea and he thought, you know, I'm not going to do it. That may have been the best moment of the whole debate for Donald Trump because it showed that unlike Hillary Clinton, for whom nothing is too mean or despicable, he actually was willing to set a standard of being decent. And I'm very proud of him. I think, you know, after what she had said about him just then, and knowing his temper, he must have been very tempted, and it took a lot of self-control. And it was 100% the right thing.
You know, I was talking to Don Jr. about this. I don't think I would have shown that restraint. I don't think I could have done that. But, you know, overall, here's an interesting thing. We've got 3 polls out that all have Trump winning. Hill has him up 51-42. Time Magazine, Time.com, 58-42. The Hill was 51-42. And Drudge has him up by like 90%. So obviously Drudge's audience pretty supportive of Donald Trump. But I was thinking, even after this debate, they talked a lot about the economy. They talked about race issues. They obviously talked about foreign policy issues. But they really didn't spend a lot of time on emails, on Benghazi, on the Clinton Foundation, on the money she takes from Saudi Arabia, on immigration, on vetting refugees, Obamacare. I thought there's still a lot of debating to go on here.
Well, first of all, I got 2 emails from Callista during the debate saying, why are they not mentioning the foundation? So I'm just reporting on behalf of my wife. But in addition, very interesting side note. Barry Castleman, who you know, great observer in Minnesota, just 10 minutes ago, sent me a poll that's coming out for tomorrow morning. In Minnesota, they are now tied, 42-42. If the Republican candidate is tied in Minnesota, the Democrats are on the edge of a catastrophe.
All right, so a friend of mine just sent me this. Time Magazine, nearly 1 million votes, 59% Trump. CNBC, nearly 400,000 votes, 60% Trump. The Hill had it 55-45. 39 Trump. My friend Joe Concha sent that to me. Drudge was exploding like 90% Trump. The only people saying no are these idiots over here at CNN.
CNN, right.
I know.
But, think about it.
Van Jones, Dave Axelrod, and Paul Begala. The biggest 3 liberal hacks in America, for crying out loud.
Sure.
It may Geraldo look like me, a right-winger.
I'm the man in the middle.
Think about, look, what did she have to prove? She had to prove she was likable. And he had to prove that he wasn't a lunatic. And in the end, he proved that he was pretty solid. He knew what that he could get through an argument with her. And she was scripted. She wasn't any more likable. And she was arrogant at the end.
It's funny because I was watching her. She's so robotic. She's so plastic. She came in with her prepared little words and lines. Even at the end, I was surprised. Because I know Donald Trump pretty well.
Then he didn't go after her at the end?
He could have hit her so hard that everybody in that audience would have gone, ooh.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
And he didn't.
He did not.
Was that right or wrong?
That's not for me to judge whether or not he should have. I know that he did not.
That's why you're here.
Let's backtrack this a little bit to where Hillary Clinton was going to go out there and vomit and pee in her pants and sing, and her legs were so wobbly she couldn't possibly endure 90 minutes.
Who said she was going to vomit and pee in her pants?
The stories that I saw leading up to this made Hillary Clinton seem like she was physically a basket case. The fact is, she stood toe-to-toe with the person I think is the most charismatic movie star debater in this country. And she matched him at least evenly. I hear these unscientific surveys. I'll tell you what I saw. I saw it right down the middle. He could have knocked her out. He
left some stuff on the table. I'll agree with you.
Where was Benghazi? Where was the wall? Where was the Clinton Foundation? Where was
Saudi Arabia's treatment of women?
All of the arrows in his quiver remained in his quiver, it seemed to me, and he was on the defensive more than he was on the offense.
But those questions weren't asked. She wasn't asked about her email. She wasn't asked about Benghazi. She wasn't asked about the Clinton Foundation. But Donald Trump should have directed those questions at her.
But by the way, Lester Holt was doing a pretty good job as her, flanker debater in this thing, getting everything wrong that he talked about.
But Sean, I think where we're seeing some of those polls reflect a win for Donald Trump. It's the same thing we saw during the Republican primary debates as well as in the commander-in-chief forum. And I think it's because the chattering class are all the political consultants, and the people that are viewing the race don't operate in that world. And Donald Trump speaks in a plain spoken language, and Hillary Clinton speaks like a politician.